J'ai cherché ça et là, je ne les ai pas trouvés. Dis-moi, où sont mes pieds? Reviens, chérie, vers moi. Mes pieds n'importe pas. C'est toi qui peux me compléter.
Goeiemôre dames en here. Hartlik welkom aan elkeen van u by hierdie doktorale gradeplegtigheid van die Universiteit Stellenbosch. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to each and everyone to this doctoral graduation ceremony at Stellenbosch University. Vanweer die COVID-19 regulasies en Universiteit Stellenbosch se gesondheids- en veiligheidsprotokolle sal hierdie geleentheid ietwat anders daaruit sien as ons gewone seremonies. Ek het 'n lys van aankondigings wat ek in belang van tyd slegs in Engels sal oordra. Ladies and gentlemen, along with the rest of the country, we closely followed the President's address last night to determine the possible impact of the newly announced regulations on our remaining graduation ceremonies. At a subsequent meeting of the organizing committee last night, we determined, based on the RSVPs we received, that we were compliant in terms of the new limit of 100 individuals for indoor gatherings. Even in our pre-event planning for the ceremonies, we instituted very strict health and safety protocols that we have been implementing since the first ceremony yesterday morning. Due to these national COVID-19 regulations and our own protocols, this event, by necessity, has to be somewhat different from our regular ceremonies. Therefore, please take careful note of the following. Only the essential staff members required to constitute a congregation will be present at this event. Thank you for understanding that we had no choice but to severely limit the number of guests that you could invite. In light of the latest announcements by the President, this now enabled us to still proceed with our ceremonies as we have fewer than 100 attendants per event. We will not be singing the national anthem as is our custom, but we will be listening to an instrumental version of the anthem directly after the procession has entered the hall. All graduates and guests have been assigned unique seat numbers. Please do not move or change seats, as the seating record and history will be used in case any potential contact tracing becomes necessary. All venues are thoroughly cleaned and disinfected as per the approved COVID-19 protocol before and after each ceremony. The wearing of a mask is mandatory for staff, graduates, and guests for the full duration of the ceremony, including when graduates cross the stage. Please maintain a safe distance of at least 1.5 meters from others at all times. While graduates will cross the stage, there will be no wooing by the registrar and also no handshaking by the Chancellor in order to comply with COVID-19 regulations. No food may be brought into or consumed in the Entler Hall. Only water is permitted inside the venue. We respectfully request that you exit the venue and the building as swiftly as possible after the event, so that cleaning and sanitizing for the next ceremony may commence as soon as possible. Please do not congregate in the foyer for photographs, but rather capture the special moment outside in front of the building or our beautiful Victoria Street. Kindly ensure that you take along your programs and any waste items such as bottles and tissues when you exit the venue. Please utilize the waste disposal bag provided. If guests and graduates do not adhere to these conditions, ladies and gentlemen, we will unfortunately have no choice but to request that you leave the venue. Baie dankie vir u geduld met die talle aanwysings, maar dit is egter in ons almal se belang. Hierdie gradeplegtigheid kan vanaf enige plek in die wêreld aanlyn gevolg word. En indien u nie vooraf daarvan kennis gedra het nie, is u welkom om die volgende webadres met vriende en familie te deel: www.sun.ac.za/streaming. Skakel asseblief u selfone af of deaktiveer die klank vir die duur van die gradeplegtigheid. U is welkom om op sosiale media u ervarings oor die gradeplegtighede te deel by #SUGrad. Let asseblief daarop dat flitsfotografie nie toelaatbaar is nie. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for bearing with me while sharing all the directives, but it is in the interest of our health and safety. This graduation ceremony can be followed via live stream from anywhere in the world. In case you were not aware of the streaming, you are welcome to share the following URL with family and friends: www.sun.ac.za/streaming. Please note that load shedding may interrupt internet connectivity and therefore also live streaming, but the recording of this event will be available on the SU YouTube channel afterwards. Load shedding will, however, not have an impact on this occasion. We have a generator on standby, so if a power outage should occur, please remain seated while we switch over to the emergency power. Lastly, we request that you please switch your cell phone off or keep it on silent for the duration of the ceremony. You are welcome to share your graduation experiences on social media at #SUGrad. And please note that flash photography is not allowed. Dames en here, ons is bykans gereed om met hierdie heugtelike geleentheid te begin. Ons vra dat u sal opstaan vir die akademiese prosesie en sal bly staan tot nadat ons die nasionale volkslied gesing het. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise for the academic procession and remain standing until after we have listened to the national anthem.
Joyful, 'n vreugdevolle geleentheid, and we start with appropriate solemnity. Ons gaan ons landlied luister, our national anthem. We're not going to sing it because of obvious reasons of contagion, but We'll listen to a recording of it, and that's how we will start our ceremony. Thank you. Please be seated. It's a very great pleasure for me, 'n besondere groot eer en 'n plesier om vir julle almal welkom te heet. This is an extraordinary occasion for many reasons. We had the President's speech last night, en gister was ons nogal bang geweest dat ons nie kan voortgaan met die gradeplechtigheid nie. Die universiteitsbestuur het verlede week Vrydag tog na alles besluit to go ahead with a very limited number of graduation ceremonies. Why? Because of you. The finest product of an academic and intellectual institution, which are its PhD graduates, whose focus and sustained concentration produces a contribution to human knowledge. So we're really very delighted to go ahead. But yesterday we had great uncertainty. And I want to pay tribute to the registrar, Dr. Recipients, sy en haar span het tot laat aand gisteraand gewerk. Miskien het jy die e-pos ontvang om middernag, wat alle reëlings, teen middernag was die reëlings alles in plek, dat ons sou kon voortgaan. Ek is verheug daaroor. En ek gaan vir Dr. Recipients vra om op te staan. Baie geluk aan haar. En haar raadspan. En vir die wat dit nie weet nie, ek is die kanselier. Ek is sedert Januarie kanselier en op my linkerkant is die rektor. Professor Wim de Villiers. Hy doen nie, ek doen niks werk nie. Ek kry net die plesier om u te ontmoet en hier voor te sit. So ons praat van besmetting. Ons land het 2 groot besmettings oorleef. And today we have, as guests of honor, I'm going to mention them both in a moment, people who have been deeply concerned with both great threats of contagion to our nation. But before I do that, and before I celebrate our 2 special guests, we have made special effort to be here for the reasons I've given you, maar ons is ook gedagtig aan die feit dat vanjaar 'n ramp was, 'n ramp vir ons ekonomie. Die bestuur van die universiteit, dink ek, het onder universiteite uitmuntend gepresteer om te kan voortgaan met die akademiese jaar. Alle eer aan die rektor en sy uitvoerende span. But it's also been a year of loss, a year of grief, My own sister was diagnosed with COVID. Fortunately, she survived well. Others didn't. So I'm going to suggest that we take a few moments to reflect. Perhaps you'll do it from an appropriate faith framework, maybe from a secular, rational belief system. Let us reflect both on the grief and losses and hardships of the year, but also on the resolve we have and what your presence here this morning in concluding your PhDs this year, that human resolve and excellence and attainment, how that is going to carry us forward into the next years. Just a few moments where you are sitting of reflection. Baie dankie dames en here. Ek verwelkom u weer. Ek weet hoekom u besonderlik welkom is. En ons het daarby, afgesien van u hier, wat binne die 100 perk wat President Ramaphosa gisterand aangekondig het, apart from you who are physically here, we also have live streaming, and you will later be able to watch the event. And I'll come back to an important part of your role in that live streaming. But first I want to acknowledge Professor Quraisha Abdul Karim, who's to my right. She'll have her moment on the stage, but I want to ask her to stand up for a moment. Thank you. Thank you, Quraisha. I'm being very personal, because we go back a long time. I was diagnosed with HIV in the 1980s, and I fell severely ill with AIDS 23 years ago, and I survived. That's the first infection I was speaking about. And at the time, there were two young researchers at UKZN who formed an extensive network of contacts with Americans, and they founded innovative, world-breaking research in epidemiology, in containment, in prevention of mother-to-child prevention, in expanding treatment. And their names were Quraisha Abdul Karim and her spouse. In that order. You agree? Dr. Slim Abdul Karim. Slim, may I ask you to stand as well? Slim, we are very proud of you, but you just stay in the corner today. You're not getting the degree today. But we're delighted to have you both here. And thank you for allowing me to speak about that very personal connection to these friends and comrades and heroes, both of them. Ons is trots op Stellenbosch, op ons veeltaligheid, en ek gaan nou vra dat ons luister na 'n spesiale boodskap in isiXhosa van Professor Malwande Dlali van ons Departement van Afrika Tale.
Molweni manene na manenekazi, siyanamkela kumsitho wokuthusuzidanga kule veki. Siyathemba ukuba olu suku luza kuba neenkumbulo ezintle kwabo baza kube bethweswa izidanga kwiintsapho zabo kunye nezihlobo ngokubanzi. Manene na manenekazi, sizama ngako konke esinako ukubiza amagama abantu ngendlela efanelekileyo. Ndiqinisekile uDean nesekela lakhe bebezama ngako konke okusemandleni kuziqhelanisa noku, kodwa okuyinyani sinabo baza kube bethweswa izidanga, abasebenzi kunye neendwendwe ezivela kwiindawo ngeendawo ezahlukeneyo, ezineelwimi ezahlukeneyo, nezo zivela ngaphaya kwemida yaseMzantsi Afrika. Yiyo loo nto sicela ukuba nibe nenyameko, kuba singakufumanisa kungumcelimngeni ukubiza amanye amagama kunye neefani. Enkosi.
Enkosi mfundisi. As I said earlier, I became Chancellor on the 1st of January this year, and little did we know what the year would have in store for us I was looking forward to my first graduations in April. None of them took place. And why I asked Dr. Retief to stand and to acknowledge all the personnel here today for persisting is that we have really achieved a feat in going ahead with these ceremonies. And I'm absolutely delighted that we have done so. I have profound respect for everything this university has done. Under Professor de Villiers' commanding and decisive leadership, this university has managed to carry on with its teaching and learning and research programs. And you are evidence of that this morning. Across our 10 faculties, 5,701 students will be receiving a sought-after Stellenbosch degree this December. It's really remarkable given what we've all been through. And that includes the most illustrious and distinguished component, which is you. 138 of you over the yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Over 12 ceremonies, we are giving your PhDs in person to you. And I have no doubt that you will use the knowledge and the skills and the stature and the depth of experience that you've gained to make the world a better place for everyone. Ek wil nou aan die kandidaat wat aan my voorgestel word, sal ek 'n eredoktorsgraad verleen. We now go over to a very beautiful part of the ceremony. It's a wonderful thing when an academic institution that takes it seriously honors someone with its highest accolade, which is an honorary doctorate. And that is what Stellenbosch is doing this morning with Dr. Gracia Abdul Karim. And it's a joyful part of the ceremony that crowns your achievement today with hers. Thank you, Vice Chancellor.
Mr. Chancellor, I have the opportunity to present to you Professor Gracia Abdul Karim with a request that you confer on her the degree Doctor of Science honoris causa. The decision by Council and Senate to award her this degree was taken on the grounds of the following considerations. Gracia Abdul Karim has made an enormous contribution towards increasing the national and international focus on HIV and AIDS prevention, especially among adolescent girls and young women in sub-Saharan Africa. She has been at the global forefront of HIV and AIDS research for 28 years. It was her team at the Center for AIDS Research in South Africa, CAPRISA, where she is Associate Scientific Director, which conducted the landmark tenofovir gel CAPRISA 004 trial. This trial demonstrated for the first time that antiretrovirals can prevent HIV infection, and since being published in the journal Science, has received more than 2,000 citations. An A-rated South African scientist and infectious diseases epidemiologist, Abdul Karim is also professor in clinical epidemiology at the Mailman School of Public Health at Columbia University, New York, and Pro-Vice Chancellor for African Health at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. She graduated with a BSc degree from the University of Durban-Westville in 1981, and then obtained a BSc honors degree in biochemistry from the University of the Witwatersrand. Moving to the USA, Abdul Karim obtained a master's degree in parasitology at Columbia University in New York in 1988, and then completed her PhD in medicine at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in 2000. Today, she is recognized worldwide for her scientific contributions in highlighting the vulnerability of young women, the need for women-initiated technologies, and the importance of integrating HIV prevention efforts into sexual reproductive health services. She has received over 30 national and international awards. These include the Order of Mapamgubwe, the highest citizen recognition from the President of South Africa, and the prestigious L'Oreal UNESCO Women in Science Award for Africa and the Middle East. She is the Special Ambassador for Adolescents and HIV on the Joint United Nations Program on AIDS, as well as the Scientific Advisor to the Executive Director of UNAIDS. She currently serves as Vice Chairperson of the Board of the SAMRC and is a member of the World Academy of Science. Mr. Chancellor, I hereby request that you confer the degree Doctor of Science honoris causa on Professor Qureisha Abdul Karim for her pioneering research in the field of HIV and for advocating for the rights of people living with and affected by HIV, for her commitment to advancing the health of young women in Africa and globally, for her research, leadership, and scientific breakthroughs, and for her generosity in sharing her knowledge through scientific and citizen-centered endeavors in Africa and beyond.
With great personal pleasure and feeling, I hereby, on behalf of this university, confer the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa on you, Dr. Qureisha Abdul Karim.
Chancellor, Deputy Vice-Chancellor and Rector, the Deputy Vice-Chancellors, Deans, Members of Council, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I think at this stage I need to remove my mask. We are gathered here under very unusual circumstances, as the Chancellor has reminded us. I am deeply honored and feel very privileged to be the recipient of this honorary doctorate. And it's been made even more special with having this conferred to me by the Chancellor, who is a very dear friend, a friendship that goes back over 3 decades. And I think that in acknowledging and recognizing the HIV epidemic as well as the COVID pandemics, we're reminded that these are not the initial and only challenges that face us, but it is our resilience in the face of these challenges that define us. And it is these types of friendships and relationships that are lifelong that help us with the resilience and coping. So with that, as I stand before you, I'm the product of many investments that many people have made very generously. And I want to start by paying tribute to these individuals and express my deep appreciation. And that starts with my mentors. And there are 4 of them that stand out. And that's Professor Jerry Kovadia, Professor Jack Moodley, Professor Mervyn Sasser, and Professor Sina Stein. In their magnanimity and generosity, they have inculcated in me the combination of scientific excellence together with social justice. And I continue to appreciate their words of wisdom and their guidance as I continue to grow as a scientist. I work as part of a very large team. I'd like to appreciate both my colleagues at the Center for the AIDS Program of Research in South Africa, and that's over 300 of us, but also my former colleagues at the South African Medical Research Council, where this journey in terms of responding to HIV was initiated. In many of the studies that we've done over the past 3 decades, we've had thousands of participants who have volunteered their time, not expecting anything more, but hoping that their contributions would enable us to have more options that perhaps could benefit their children or their grandchildren. And while much remains to be done, I think that the role of participants in clinical research cannot be underestimated. They enable us to explore and investigate ideas, test them, evaluate them, and enable science to move forward that can benefit society. I'd like to also acknowledge the many collaborators and funders that we have. But today, we're also gathered here to recognize two important groups of people. The first is the graduands for 2020, and secondly, the parents of those graduands. So very much as we appreciate the parents of the graduates, I also want to appreciate my family who've supported me, Slim, who's walked this 30-odd-year journey together with me and here today, my children, Wazim, who's here with us today, and Safura and Aisha, who join us in spirit. My parents, my siblings, my extended family, and many, many friends who have actually moved from friends to being part of our family. Today, we are celebrating in the College of Health Sciences, in the Faculty of Health Sciences, and in the midst of the COVID epidemic, where we've had so much uncertainty, you are entering a profession, and some have been contributing in a profession that has been so central, where knowledge has been very limited, but has grown very rapidly. The key and first role and recognition I want to pay is to the first responders. The first responders who remind us how precious a gift life is and how we grow by giving. They are able to use the science that scientists generate, but in the midst of calamity, in the midst of uncertainty, they're able to take that scientific knowledge, apply it, and extend it so that life can be preserved. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Marsdorp. In March, when many of us started to hear about the COVID epidemic and started to think about a response, we were clueless. There were a handful of publications, but we had no idea what a national lockdown was. We had no idea about non-pharmaceutical interventions. But she and her team, very diligently, every day would prepare a digest of whatever was available. And many of us were spending hours and hours trying to figure out what an appropriate response would be, really benefited from this digest that was produced by the University of Stellenbosch, speaking to its leadership and its wisdom and its ability to respond rapidly in the face of crisis. And I can't even begin to tell you how many hundreds and thousands of us eagerly opened up that digest every morning, devoured what new information was there that had been synthesized, and were left with state-of-the-art knowledge in terms of what new did we learn from the day before. And it is amazing that in our response to COVID, that science, I think, has established itself as a firm part of society. We understand the role of scientists, both to generate at least 3 levels. 1, to generate new knowledge. 2 is to respond and be advocates for that evidence to be applied so that lives benefit and society benefits. And 3 is to communicate that knowledge to the public so that it's accessible, it's available, with all of its warts, I'd like to say. I want to remind us that science is very uncertain. We know less about particular issues, and there's more that we don't know. And I think with each day and each year, that knowledge grows. And it is incumbent upon us as scientists that we speak truth to power, but we also don't extend what our knowledge is, that we reveal what we know and what we don't know equally, so that the public can appreciate that when thinking about science and the role of science in society, that there are differences of opinion, that science requires replicability. It requires many, many years of investment before we can say we've reached a consensus. And it is the differences of opinion that helps us to advance. And that differences of opinion doesn't mean that we polarized. It helps us to think smarter, much more focused. COVID-19 has reminded us of our interdependence, that we are because of others, and that when we work together nationally and globally, we can achieve miracles. If somebody asked me in March, and somebody did, will we have a vaccine this year? And I said, absolutely not. Because our knowledge generation process up to this point has been, it takes 8 to 10 years before you can get a vaccine. But we have a very classic case here of the tail of the hare and the tortoise. In working with HIV, we still almost 4 decades later, don't have a vaccine. But with COVID-19, we have 5 efficacious vaccines, ranging from 60%, 62% to over 90%. That is unprecedented. And as we hear and we celebrate the doctoral graduates and all of our achievements, that must stand out in the face of the challenges that bring us together in this hybrid graduation, that humanity has reached new heights in the face of this virus, and that we can do that when we work together. And there is no room for nationalism, there is no room for isolationism or any kind of ism. That when we are inclusive and we work with unity of purpose, we can achieve great things. Leadership is important. In government, in contrast to our HIV response, we have seen consistent leadership from the President and from the Minister of Health. Big contrast when we go back 30 years ago or around 2000, when we had democratically elected officials questioning, does HIV cause AIDS? That has been a huge positive in enabling us to respond rapidly and respond in a coherent and consistent manner, and to enable, through engagement with community, give individuals in society agency and empower them to take the steps that need to be taken, even in the absence of vaccine, to protect themselves and protect those around them. These partnerships with community and engagement with community is absolutely central. Chancellor has spoken to this issue, that we cannot act in communities without communities being at the table and being part of finding solutions and acting. Strategic information is critical. It's been something that we've been working on, because when you know your epidemic, you know where infections are, you can make a huge difference. But we know that the body of science, where we have prevention options, where we have treatment, is an important starting point to a response that then enables us to have hope. And when we do better with those diagnostics, when we do better with those treatments and prevention modalities, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And I would like to end with, my work has been around gender inequities. And both with COVID and with HIV, we've made very little success. I have tried in the 32 years, we have some hope with the women-initiated technologies that addresses and tries to address the root cause of their vulnerability, which is gender power dynamics. We're trying to fix a social problem with technology. It's an important first step, but we cannot move our gaze from where the challenge is. And when we have a situation where in Africa, 65% of the population is under the age of 35, we cannot afford to gamble this demographic dividend we have by not allowing young women to reach the age of maturity. We see young women with a disproportionate burden of HIV infection, but also a disproportionate burden of deaths that we see. And on top of the HIV epidemic, which has some visibility, on top of COVID-19 that has some visibility, we have that underlying invisible epidemic, pandemic indeed, of gender-based violence. As we aspire to a better world, we cannot afford to move forward with these types of inequities continuing, because if half the world is in silence and darkened and blocked, we cannot reach our potential as human beings. So this is an opportunity, graduates, to reimagine the future. It is an unusual time, it is a difficult time, but you have an opportunity to rethink what is the future you want. It is a moment to dream big, for all of us to do that, for all of us to rethink our priorities, what we value, what we want, and what we seek. And we need to commit to this act in our daily lives on what we have dreamed of, and that can become a reality. So thank you once again for this enormous and distinguished recognition, and I wish you well in your careers, and thank you very much to the University of Stellenbosch.
Thank you so much, Professor Qureisha Abdul Karim. You've spoken about the importance to our world of scientific empiricism, which Professor Formink's faculty and you as graduands from it emblematize in our world. But you've also spoken about the importance of social power, and then thirdly, you've spoken about our contribution to the construction of both social power and empirical knowledge. And it'll be over to you now to use your qualification in advancing the goals that Professor Karim spoke about this morning. Both a profound graduation address and an inspiring one. We thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now your turn, and I'm looking forward to meeting you across the stage. But before we do that, I want to acknowledge the people that I know you also want to give thanks and acknowledgement to, your supervisors. We have a list of 10 duties in die reglement van die universiteit. Pligte wat 'n studieleier moet volvoer. I'm not going to read them all, but it's a heavy duty, dis 'n groot verantwoordelikheid, dis 'n swaar verantwoordelikheid. En ek weet dat u vandag wat u verskuldig is aan u studieleiers sal ken. May I ask all the supervisors who are here today to stand? Would you please stand? I'm going to ask the Dean, Professor Formink, to take over the proceedings in a moment, but I want to emphasize something. You're going to come across the stage. We're not going to have a handshake. We will nod to each other. And after I've conferred the degree on you, turn around to your family, to your guests, to your supervisor, and to the camera, and make it your moment. This moment belongs to you. Don't hurry off the stage. Gister, toe die landbouers hier was, het ek hulle probeer oorreed om 'n dans te doen. If any of you wants to do a dance or a utilation, if there's families here who are going to utilate this is why we're here. For this moment of your affirmation of your intellectual prowess. We are so proud of you. And with that joyful moment, ons gaan oor na u, Professor Formiink.
Mr. Chancellor, I request you to acknowledge the following candidates who graduated in March 2020 with a doctoral qualification. These candidates will cross the stage for ceremonial purposes only. Christelle Ackerman with dissertation, Diffusion Tensor Imaging of the Brain in Pediatric HIV, with supervision provided by Professor Mark Cotton.
Sorry to let this go.
Lynette Carmen Daniels with dissertation, Support for Exclusive Breastfeeding in the Workplace, Development of a Practice Model for Designated Workplaces in the Breda Valley Sub-District of the Western Cape Province, South Africa. Supervision provided by Professor Shikumbiso Mbenyane. Madhuri Hendrina Engelbrecht with dissertation, Occupational Justice Through Paid Work, a qualitative study of work transition programs for youths with disabilities, supervision provided by Professor Lana van Niekerk. Barbara Lawton with dissertation, The Neurodevelopmental Outcome of Perinatally HIV-Infected Children on Different Antiretroviral Treatment Strategies, supervision by Professor Mark Cotton. Thank you. Adrian Johannes Flock with dissertation, Comparison of Intrathecal and Intravenous Morphine for Post-Operative Analgesia after Single-Level Spinal Fusion Surgery, supervision by Professor Andre Coetzee. Meneer die kanselier, ek versoek u om die graad dokter in die wysbegeerte in die fakulteit Geneeskunde en Gesondheidswetenskappe aan die kandidate wat ek aan u voorstel te verleen. Mr. Chancellor, I request you to confer on the candidates whom I'll present to you the degree Doctor of Philosophy in the Faculty of Medicine and Health Sciences. Priscilla Estelle Springer, with dissertation, Neurodevelopmental and Behavioral Outcome of the HIV-Exposed, Uninfected Infant and Child, supervision provided by Professor Mariana Krier. Hawa Dawood, with dissertation, An Analysis of Auditory Functioning and Capabilities of Children with HIV Living in Low Socioeconomic Communities, supervision by Professor Karen Grimmer.
Well done, Father.
Corinne Duprier, with dissertation, Complementary Surveillance Strategies and Interventions to Inform a Tuberculosis Care Cascade for Children, supervision by Professor Anneke Hesselen. Riette Dutoy, with dissertation, Lupus myocarditis, Diagnostic Characteristics and Outcome of Myocardial Injury, supervision provided by Professor Anton de Bel. Fanny Priscille Ikoumi, with dissertation, Implementation of Guidelines on Hospital Radiopharmacy in Low-Income Settings, supervision provided by Professor Roubaud. Luke David Hunter, with dissertation, Echocardiographic Screening for Subclinical Rheumatic Heart Disease, Improving Screening through Simplification of the Diagnostic Criteria, supervision provided by Dr. Herbst.
Well done, Luke.
Johannes Stephanus Leroux, with dissertation, Optimization of Production Methods for Gallium-68 labeled PET radiopharmaceuticals in a Hospital Radiopharmacy, supervision by Professor Roubaud. Michael Gilbert McCall, with dissertation, Strengthening Pre-Hospital Clinical Practice Guideline Development for South Africa, supervision provided by Professor Mike Clark. Robert Kenneth Douglas McLean, with dissertation, Innovation and Incentives, Role of the Research Funder in Knowledge Translation and Scaling Science, with supervision by myself.
Well done, Robert. Congratulations.
Deborah Nabuma, with dissertation, Development of a Contextualized Food-Based Strategy to Improve the Dietary Diversity and Nutritional Status of Children aged 12 to 36 months in rural farming households in central Uganda, with supervision by Shikumbiso Mbenyani.
Well done, Deborah.
Elsha Sophia Scheffler, with dissertation, The Design, Development and Evaluation of an Appropriate Stroke Rehabilitation Training Program for Community Health Workers in a Rural Primary Healthcare Setting in the Western Cape, South Africa. Supervision by Professor Bob Mash.
Hartelijk uiteraard.
Congratulations. André van der Merwe, with dissertation, Penile allotransplantation for phallic loss due to ritual circumcision, proof of concept. Supervision provided by Professor Rafik Musa.
Hartelijk André.
Meneer de kanselier, ek versoek u om aan die kandidaten wie se name ook aan u voorgelê is, maar wat nie hier teenwoordig is nie, die onderskeie grade in hul afwesigheid te verleen. Mr. Chancellor, I request you to confer the degrees on those candidates whose names have been presented to you, but who could not attend in their absence.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. I hereby confer degrees on the names of the candidates who have been presented to me, but who are not present today. Ek verleen hiermee grade aan al die kandidaten in absentia wie se naam aan my voorgehou is. And I think I should also confer your degrees on you. Did we do that, Mr. Dean, earlier? I hereby confer degrees on you beautiful people. We've reached the end of this beautiful ceremony, a beautiful and proud and joyful ceremony with lovely elements in it. And we want to affirm you as you go out into your next step of your life, your career. Stay connected to Stellenbosch. Ek was jare terug, ek gaan nie vir u sê hoe lank nie, was ek hier op Stellenbosch gewees vir 4,5 jaar. Ek het 'n BA gedoen, 'n honeursgraad. En Stellenbosch het by my gebly. Die belangrikheid van my diepste vriende, my hegste vriendskapsbande is nou nog vir die mense met wie ek in Wolkenhol was. In die koshuis hier in die regsfakulteit. So keep your bonds to your alma mater. They are significant, they are profound. Vice Chancellor, yesterday I got the name of the website wrong, but I'm going to get it right today. There's martisconnect.com, which helps you to stay connected to potential jobs, to mentors, to networks, and also stay connected to the alumni hubs. There are alumni hubs all over the world and all over South Africa. We are enormously proud of you. We are enormously proud of the knowledge advancement that what you have attained represents today. Let us take that forward in ways that will be significant to all of us. Our graduation speaker has emphasized the importance of applying knowledge in ways that intervene in the suffering and the impediments of the world. And I know that each of you will do that. Now I told you I didn't do any job as Chancellor, but I've got power. By the power vested in me in the statute of the University of Stellenbosch, I hereby declare that this congregation of the university is closed. Ek verklaar hiermee dat hierdie kongregasie van die Universiteit Stellenbosch op 'n einde is. Baie dankie.